flex and health. And today I'm joined by an absolutely fabulous panel and a very diverse panel, which you'll hear from in a minute. So I've got Helena, who is the Managing Director at enMasse, Marcus, who is a chiropractor and also a clinical nutritionist at Provolution Health, Andrea, who's the Head of Business Strategy and Marketing Coordinator at HFM Asset Management, and Christo, who's the CIO at the ACT Government. Before we move on, I do want to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land, for those elders past, present and emerging. So thank you and welcome. Today will be an interactive discussion. So if you've got a device, if you've got a phone or something else nearby, I encourage you to get it, because we will be doing some live polling and conversations as we go. So before we kick off, we'd love to hear from you. So what's your current role? Are you a leader? Are you a manager, HR professional, employee, self-employed or other? Would love to hear what hat you're wearing when you're joining this conversation today. So I'll give you a minute. So what you need to do is to jump onto menti.com and type in the code 630, I'm a bit dyslexic, 633062 and share with us what hat you're wearing today. So we've got one person who's saying they're a leader, HR professional. And what this is going to do, this is just going to really help us bespoke our responses to you today. I mentioned earlier, we've had a lot of responses to this webinar, over 50 people, but given the time and the busyness of the day, I've seen with a couple of our webinars today that people have dropped me notes saying they'd rather watch the recording, which is absolutely fine. So Marcus will be speaking for the whole session. Marcus, probably about 30 to 45 minutes. This session will go for, if that's okay. If you have to drop off early, absolutely not a problem. So we've got a mix of leader, HR professional, employee, manager and self-employed. So welcome. We're glad to have you here. What we'd love to hear from you before we kick off, I'm going to ask the panel to introduce themselves and share what these words mean to them, and then also their reflections on what comes up. But what we want to hear from you first is what comes to mind when you hear the words health and well-being. So again, if you leave that menti.com open, you can just press refresh, or if you've closed it, type in the code 633062. I would love to hear what comes to mind when you hear those words. Okay, and as the words start rolling in, what I might do is, who would like to introduce themselves first? I won't pick on anyone, I'll see who would like to take the lead.
I'd be happy to, Ness, if you like.
Yeah, that'd be fabulous. So tell us a little bit about yourself, what these words mean to you, and any reflections that you've got on this word cloud would be fabulous.
Yeah, sure. So as Ness said, my name is Christo Norman. I'm the Chief Information Officer in the ACT government and within the Chief Minister, Treasury and Economic Development Directorate. And health and well-being. I think these are the words that are flashing up for me are really quite interesting. One of them that I would have expected at the moment is almost challenging. Over the last 3 months, we've just had such a huge change to the way that people live and breathe and do everything day to day, and it's been really, really interesting how people have risen to the occasion certainly in my directorate. I was actually talking with one of my people today, and they were saying that yeah, 3 months ago when this all kicked in. Was it 3 months ago? It wasn't even 3 months. Yeah,
it was 3 months.
It was 3 months ago. You know, she was saying that how much she was revolted with the idea of working from home, because she knows how to work at work and the technology. And today she was saying, I don't want to come back to work because I've, despite the fear and uncertainty that I had, now her productivity's gone up, her ability to look after her children has improved. Not that she enjoyed the no school bit at all, but she actually sees the value of an increased work-life balance, which I think I saw saw there earlier. And being able to balance things, which is coming up as the primary word, was one of the key things that she came up with. For me, that balance is really around three things: body, mind, and soul. I find that if you've got a healthy body, a healthy mind, and a healthy soul, then generally, for me, I feel quite well centered. Other people might have different centers of gravity for how well balanced they become, but they seem to be my pivots or my areas that I need to balance on to create a healthy and well grounded outlook on life.
Great, thank you. So I'll put it open to the panel. Who would like to go next?
I'm happy to go next, Vanessa, if you like. Hello, Helena Kuo from enMasse. We are a behaviour change organisation and focus principally on mental health and wellbeing issues, as well as diversity and inclusion. So it's kind of like all of the planets have aligned in this in the current environment that we are in. And I really liked Christo's description of wellbeing, that body, mind and soul sort of come together in terms of well-being and health. And certainly when I think about health and well-being, I think that we have a really clear link between our physical health and our mental health. And so I think we can't separate the two. And for us to have good physical health and to have good mental health, we need to really focus on both of those. And we know now, and there's a body of research, and that body of research is actually growing, that if we take good care of our physical health, then our mental health absolutely benefits. And there's some interesting research, Vanessa, you will be across this very much, about the influence that our gut health actually has on our mental health and well-being. And on the flip side, if we don't take care of our mental health and well-being, then oftentimes our physical health will suffer. So if I'm not sleeping well, or if I'm really, really stressed and that's causing me to not sleep well, then I'm really not going to feel like getting up in the morning and going for my walk or doing Pilates or whatever it is. So for me, health and well-being really is about looking after both our physical health as well as our mental health. And I saw up there on the word cloud a couple of words that really resonated with me, and that is resilience and happiness. And for us to build our resilience, then we absolutely need to focus on both our physical and mental health and well-being. And so, you know, very much interlinked. And the more work I do in the mental health space, I see that link is very strong. So that's kind of what it means to me, really.
Thank you. Over to you, Marcus. It looks like Marcus, are you there? It's like he's frozen on my end. Andrea, over to you.
Yep. Hi, everyone. As Vanessa said, my name is Andrea Quintero. I'm the Business Strategy and Marketing Coordinator at HFM Asset Management. So, but my background by no means is related to health at all. But as I said to Vanessa, I'm happy to share my personal experience on what I have gone through, because I do work for a company that is offering quite a lot in promoting this flexible work lifestyle, and they encourage all of us to take advantage of these. So work-life balance is probably the main one for me. I'm an Australian citizen, but I'm originally from Colombia, hence my accent. So obviously being away from my family, probably right now during the pandemic, everyone had to experience this online conversation with family and friends. And that is different to when you actually have time next to them and get to experience their company. So for me, when my family comes to visit me and I have these flexible work arrangements to be able to start early, finish early, to actually go to parks and different places with them and show them around what my life is like, that was a big difference for me, because I wouldn't be able to take 3 months off just because they were here. I did take a few days off here and there, but having that work-life balance, I think that changes the way that you feel, the way that you work, and it's going to benefit your whole life. So that's part of what it is for me. Something else that I recently experienced, there was an arrangement that we did with my work so that I could fulfill one of my personal goals, which was to travel around the world for 1 year. We arranged to work remotely while I fulfilled this personal goal that I had. And so I had to cut it short because of the pandemic, and I'm back in Australia now, but I'm still planning to go ahead with it, and having that support means the world for me, because I don't have to give up on my personal goals to fulfill my professional goals. So I think for me, the main thing is that work-life balance.
Such a fabulous story. And so when I was putting this panel together, and I did reach out to Andrea, she said, I don't work in health and I'm not a health specialist. But I said, your story is so powerful, because it really does show when your organisation supports modern flexibility and is open to conversations around having a year off, a full-on year break, and then when this hit, saying, right, you can come back. How fabulous is that for your health, well-being, your loyalty to that business? It's an absolute win-win. So thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
So before we get into a little bit more on the panel, Marcus, you're there. Hello. For some reason it dropped off before. So
it did drop off. The cleaner's unplugged. I apologise.
That's okay. We can't move on without your thoughts on, please introduce yourself, and what comes to mind with the words health and well-being, and also what is coming up with you when you look at this word cloud.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. And firstly, thank you for the invitation. It's, I think, really valuable to be able to contribute to the conversation, and it's a really important project that you have here. So thank you for the work that you do. I think that's so important for you to also be acknowledged for everything that you do.
Yeah, thank you.
My name is Dr. Marcus Chacos. I'm a chiropractor, naturopath, nutritionist at Provolution Health. And I think I just want to reference the word Provolution because it probably plays into all of this as well. It dates back to some of the French philosophers, and its basis is in pro-evolution, the difference between evolution, which is slow, imperceptible change, and revolution, which is rapid and destructive change, is the ability to be conscious and deliberate about the choices and changes we make, making it pro-evolutionary or proactive evolution. And I think that ties really very much into well-being. We look back at the definition of health, and the World Health Organization comes back to not the absence of signs and symptoms, disease or infirmity, but total health and well-being of a person, including physical, mind, body, spirit, and social and community as well. So all of those elements are important for health, but I think well-being is something even more significant. And Christo spoke earlier about body, mind, soul, and I like to look at well-being as optimizing peak performance in the 7 pillars of optimum health, which is, optimized nervous system, physical robustness, health, well-being and resilience, biochemical, physiological and hormonal optimized function as well. And then you bring in emotional, mental, environmental, genetic and spiritual elements. and you have really a total healing blueprint, and that gives you a foundation for whether or not you have well-being. Because a person can say, look, I eat the best diet, I have fantastic diet, and I exercise all the time, but they have a high stress job that brings them anxiety and a sense of, you know, displeasure, and you still don't have well-being. Or you could have a very peaceful, loving environment and a wonderful job around you, but if you're not taking time out for rest, relaxation, if you're not exercising and eating the right foods, then there isn't a harmonious internal state of the body, which then plays into how it affects your emotional mental state, your ability to focus, to concentrate, and bring all of those incredible words on display there of, you know, functioning well, being stress-free, having balance, happiness, resilience, mental health. All of those tie in when you have that entire blueprint of health, because your ability to function, peak perform, and operate at the highest levels in the workplace, your ability to be supportive of your people in your work community or your family or your social community comes down to whether or not you can have that state of internal harmony. And all of those elements come about as a result of balance in each of those pillars. So I think well-being is actually a total lifestyle approach to being able to experience what it is that you want, which is a passionate, fulfilled, purpose-driven life. And when you have that, the rest all falls into place simultaneously.
Isn't this fabulous? Because we've got all different perspectives. That's what I love about panel conversations. Thank you, Marcus, and for bringing that clinical perspective. So that's a really holistic approach, your 7 pillars. I love it. So before we move on, and I'm going to ask the panel a couple of questions, deep health and wellbeing. So this is just a model that we use at Flexagility, and you've heard different models shared by the panel, but I just want to take you through this very briefly. I suppose I didn't anticipate that the panel's responses would be so, I should have, because they're fabulous, so in depth. But just quickly, I want to touch on this. So this is only my approach at Flexagility around, well, deep health comes from environmental. So what's around us, really focusing on toxins, so either things that we're ingesting, such as drugs and coffee and alcohol and things like that, but also the creams we rub on our skin, the smoke, you know, if you're caught in the bushfires, they're all environmental aspects that impact our health. Physical, that's where people feel like they're thriving, they've got lots of energy, they perform well. Often when we think about physical health, as Marcus said, we think about nutrition, what people are putting in their mouths, but it is far greater than that. It's about saying, okay, how do I feel when I wake up in the morning? What's my physiological responses in my body? How are my hormones playing out? Are they optimal? Mental, which I know Helena will talk to, no doubt, it's one of her favourite topics, is really working through that cognitive and mental health. So making sure that we're in a space, particularly through times where we're under immense amounts of stress, how are we going back to centre? How are we reducing the strain on our nervous system? And when we do, we solve problems better, we function better, we can think more clearly, we react to stresses much better. Then we've got emotional health. So that's really about how good are we at recognising our own emotions, firstly recognising them and then regulating them. And then also, how good are we at recognising emotions in others and helping to support them regulate their emotions? Exponential health, so that's really coming back to that sense of belonging. So we're hearing around the flexibility that many people, for some, they're feeling incredibly supported and part of a community and feeling like they belong in their workplace, even though they've moved to a flexible, in many instances, type of working. But for others, they don't feel that, and that impacts people's health. If they don't feel like they belong, if they don't feel like their work is valued, it impacts their health. And then, of course, there's a social element of this model, which is about feeling connected, feeling authentic, feeling like you're playing to your strengths in the world, feeling like you're supported and you belong. So if you've got any questions as you go, like I said, please drop them in the Q&A box. What we'd love to hear from you is, what are the areas, and I do apologise that I've just used this one model because Christo shared one and you've shared one, Marcus, but this is the one that came to my mind, but we'll go with it. So what areas do you need to improve for your deep health and well-being, reflecting on that particular model? So the low end of the spectrum is obviously low and the high is high. So if you go on to menti.com and you use the code 633062, we'd love to hear from you. And then what I'm going to do is ask the panel their reflections and come at it from the perspective where they're strongest. So what I'll do is I'll ask Andrea if you can kick off on reflecting on the social element. So with Andrea's story, I'm not sure, you might have missed it, Marcus, when you became unplugged, but she shared that at the beginning of COVID, she was on a trip around the world for a year and she had to pull that back. And so there's been some implications, obviously, on the dreams and what you had planned, but also that social interaction because a lot of your family is overseas. So as these responses come in, I'd love you to kick off on the social aspect of what people are sharing here and any reflections that you've got.
Yes, of course. Well, yeah, as I said, I was going to be gone for 1 year working remotely during that time. So I did get the chance to do it for a couple of months. And during that time, I got to experience firsthand living for short periods of times in different countries such as Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia. And I continued working. So it was still my work-life balance. My office was the hotel room, and then I was off to get to see the different communities. And it wasn't, I went with my husband, so we didn't take it as just a holiday. It was a personal growth type of trip. And the plan was to get involved and get to see a little bit about what it's like to live in each of those places. So having that social component during that time, that made a big difference when we went out and ended up interacting with locals and hearing their stories. Also, when we Skype or catch up with our families back in Colombia or here, that was a great support during the time that we were away. And then, while the situation started getting worse, obviously having all that support and feeling that everyone was taking care in a way for us and giving us advice and keeping an eye on how we were doing. We almost didn't make it home. All the flights were canceled. So there was all the drama that went behind it. But obviously that sense of connection and belonging and the support from my company was amazing. Obviously, as soon as I came, I was working while all this was happening, and then coming back to Australia to continue working remotely and just having them check on me all the time, wondering how I was doing, how stressful the situation was. So for them to understand all of that made a big difference. And as you say, that sense of belonging and that sense of being part of that group, because in a way, for me, that I'm not from here and I don't know that many people, I don't have my family here, just knowing that as soon as I came back, I had a support group here that was keeping an eye on how we were doing, that made a huge difference.
Great, thank you. Marcus, I'm keen to hear on your reflections on this graph. So how it works is there's standard distribution behind each of these. So we can see environmental, there's a bit of a trend here. Physical, it's not so high, but then we have a trend at the end. Mental, there's quite a peak here. Emotional, there's a couple of peaks. Exponential, there's one here. And then the social, there's one at the bottom.
Yeah, I think from a clinical perspective, it's very obvious to see that COVID had a significant impact socially in terms of obviously the isolation. And I know that, and also the ability to have not just contact in terms of social contact with people, but connection with people, and also the ability to have a hug or to shake hands. There was almost this paradoxical state of, I want to give you a hug or I want to shake your hands. I had somebody say to me today they have kept their hands in their pockets for 3 months to avoid reaching out to people. And it was a very, psychologically challenging period. So we know people's mental and emotional resilience was tested. I don't think the physical resilience, because working at home for a lot of people changed their posture, their ergonomic setup. So when I look at this list, it doesn't surprise me that people have communicated that, they needed to improve really across the board in a number of areas. Maybe people did do their work at home in terms of they needed to correct their environment, get the ergonomics right, but they got to do time with their family and connect with family, and that was always gratifying. They got to work on home projects that they never have time for because they're at work. But ultimately, I think all of those areas suffered significantly over the last couple of months. But not only, we're certainly reflecting on the COVID period when we talk about this, but I think it's not isolated to COVID. What it highlighted was that we do not do enough physical activity, that we do live in periods of times of stress and where we are not necessarily getting the emotional, mental support or aren't resourced sufficiently to do that. And we don't necessarily have clarity in regard to our meaning and purpose of our job. And that sometimes our job offers us that social networking, but we are sometimes losing the support from our family. And so this gave us an opportunity to reflect on where our priorities are. And when I look at this, it's a really simple equation for most people, is to start realizing that, and I know there was a little bit of comment earlier on work-life balance, but I'd call it, rather than looking for balance, it becomes priorities management, because there's always enough time. Everyone has the same amount of time, but we don't necessarily prioritize things in the right way. And so when we do prioritize our physical well-being, our mental, emotional well-being, our focus on our spiritual life, and creating social and community networks and reflecting on our environment, all these key points here, we have the opportunity to design into our life that which gives us and allows for us to experience what it is that we want in life, which should be meaningful work, meaningful relationships, meaningful experiences. And therefore that becomes a foundation for a positive, beneficial health experience and lifestyle experience too. So I think these are great reflections. It's wonderful that you've put them there. And I know that people are commenting that not only do they have these areas that they need to reflect on, but they have to do the work in alignment with that too.
And that can be hard, can't it? So as we go, if you've got some tips to share around how to do that, I'd love to hear from you all. From my own perspective, for me, it's been about getting really clear what success looks like in each of these areas. And then once I've done that, I've been able to, it's almost like you cast the net out. And once you've done that, your mind just makes its way up and it directs you to where you want to go. And sometimes it's not that easy. Sometimes you need to talk to a friend, or you need to purchase a coaching session or a session with a counsellor to help you, but it's powerful. So I'd love to hear other reflections, and I'll hand it over to you, Christo.
Sorry, to me, Ness, was that to me?
Yeah, I'd love to, any reflections that you've got on this graph.
Look, I really think it's really interesting, but hugely challenging, I think, in particularly in Canberra, where we have a large contingent of large enterprise government approaches towards the way that we carry out our work-life balance. And I was reflecting on, I think it was Existential, where it talked about a sense of meaning and purpose. Mm-hmm. And if you look, one of the challenges we often face in government is, as an employee, it's really easy for me to have I've joined and I then look to following this process and I'm doing my job. Outcomes don't matter. So my own sense of purpose can be challenged with things like that. And I think that something like where we are today with COVID-19 is actually challenging the way that the public service certainly has been working previously. We've often had an output-based, a process-focused on the way that people work, but all of a sudden people working home doesn't mean any longer that we can work with a management by presenteeism. All of a sudden we need to start focusing on management by outcome. And what a great opportunity to start focusing in, for example, on Existential, by managing and working towards outcomes. All of a sudden you can start saying, well, you know what I'm achieving and what I'm contributing to, instead of just being a cog in the wheel and a process. I can really see fantastic opportunities if departments are in a position to grab the bull by the horns and capitalize on a good crisis, right?
Absolutely.
So you know, I'm really fascinated by that. And Andrea, I was really interested in how well supported you felt in what you were talking about. We're certainly talking, or as I'm talking with other departments, we're certainly talking about, great, fantastic. So we're getting through our pandemic, better get everyone back into the office because that's how we work. And immediately making it challenging to realize the sorts of dreams that you had. And yet our workforce is often coming up and saying, well, you know what? I'm feeling that I'm able to do the same degree of work in half the amount of time, and I'm able to make myself a cup of tea in my own kitchen and carry out other activities while still being just as productive when I do have that work life or the ability to make a decision as to where and how I work. And I think the pandemic has taken away some of our ability there. Going into work is actually really important, and connection with people, I think, is really valuable. I like the hug idea that you were talking about, Marcus. I think you're absolutely right. I hired a new employee about a month ago, and I went into the office to make sure that he had a pass and things like that because we've been working from home. First thing I did was, because I'd seen nobody for ages, was shake his hand and then go, damn it. But it was really gratifying to just to shake his hand, even though I then immediately had to say, okay, and here's some sanitizer. So for me, none of these are where they should be, but there are areas where we can see that work-life balance significantly changing for the better if we empower the enterprises across Canberra to do so. And I'm not sure how that can happen. I think it'll happen in isolated instances, but in the more conservative areas, I think it'll be really hard to see that change. And
I think, you know, you're looking at 3 other panelists here where in their businesses, I know for sure that that exponential and all of these elements of health really and well-being, but definitely that sense of purpose is crystal clear. I can say on behalf of Helena's business, where Andrea works, and then also Marcus's businesses, and it's huge, like the loyalty, and it flows through to customers. It's absolutely evident. So Helena, over to you. I'd love your thoughts. I know you're going to love this one on the mental health.
Yes, it's, well, Vanessa, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? You know, mental health and emotional health, you know, people score, you know, they are the areas that I actually need to improve my well-being the most. And, you know, certainly with the this pandemic, you know, we've seen enormous challenges for people across all of those areas that we've got here on the slide. And certainly I was really interested to hear Christo speak about the existential part as well, and meaning and purpose, because in terms of resilience, we know that one of the pillars in one of the models of resilience is to have meaning and purpose, and people who do have high levels of meaning and purpose in their life actually tend to fare much better in terms of their mental health and well-being. And I think it's really interesting now, you know, we've had this amazing work from home experiment, and organisations are seeing, whereas maybe they hadn't previously, that yes, we actually can have a productive workforce working from home. And there is a group of people who love working from home and they've really enjoyed it, and they want to continue working from home. They don't want to go back into the office. But also what we've seen is that there is a group of people who haven't enjoyed working from home, and we know that there's been a huge increase in loneliness, and particularly for people who live alone, and they actually are now finding themselves, they have to work alone. And of course, having supportive relationships around you is one of the really key protective factors for mental health and well-being. So I think it's going to be interesting. You know, there's going to be 2 groups of people who have quite different ideas, and I think the way in which this will play out when we get to whatever our new normal is that we will have some people wholly returning to work, some people partially returning to work, and some people working from home on a permanent basis. And so I think in terms of, from an organisational perspective, how to meld all of that together and work all of in that model is going to be another challenge, because I think when we're all working from home, we're kind of all of us, you know, we're in the same boat and we connect over Zoom or telecon or whatever it is. But in terms of connectedness, when some of us are in the office and some of us are working from home, so in the office you have those incidental water cooler chats, or in the staff tea room you have those incidental chats, so you don't necessarily get that chat at home, but and you find out what's going on incidentally at work, not necessarily through formal channels. And so there may be, and there's no research yet, it's just kind of some things that we're talking about, you know, there may be some people who are working from home over a period of time and they may start to feel excluded rather than included. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But certainly I think the pandemic has really demonstrated that, yes, you know, we absolutely can work at home. Flexibility is a given. I don't think it's now something that is a negotiable option. I think, you know, we all accept that that flexibility is good for our work-life balance, being able to spend time with our families, not having to do the commute, particularly places like Sydney and Melbourne, where that can take quite a while for some people to get to work. And so if I come back to that graph, you know, I'm not surprised really to see that the areas that are scoring the lowest in terms of we need to spend more time on our mental health and our emotional health they're the areas of focus. And we have seen an increase in anxiety across the board due to this uncertainty, and we kind of got used to a bit of uncertainty being at home when we were all socially isolated. Now there's the uncertainty of how is it going to work if I need to come back into the office? Is my colleague going to be far enough away from me? Are they going to be as responsible as me in terms of hygiene measures of washing hands and hand sanitizer and all of that? So I think we're still in for a really interesting journey into settling into whatever our new normal is going to look like.
Absolutely. And we've had a few questions around, is the office still needed? You know, is it still relevant? And is there any research about that? And I'm not sure if there's any research out just yet, but I'm very keen to hear thoughts of the panelists if you want to jump in. In the meantime, I'll ask everyone to jump on Menti, use the same code 633062. We want to hear from you. How does flexible impact your health and well-being? So what are the thoughts? Is the office still needed? What do we think?
I think it's absolutely needed. I think that creating a, people will often talk about activity-based working. I think that in today's work world, we're talking more about alternate work strategies. Activity-based working talks to providing you with the tools to do the type of work you need to do at the time, but not so much the place. Mm-hmm. But the workplace is as a place where people come together for specific reasons. They should be. It's a great place to collaborate, to build that connection, to establish a rapport and purpose. I think all of those are very strong and compelling reasons to have a workplace. To enforce attendance to a workplace 5 days a week or whatever you work, I think is, particularly in the white collar world, is I think becoming increasingly redundant. So there will be a shift there. And how we orchestrate that, I've no idea, because, if you've got a workplace today, surely you want to have your own workspace in that office, because otherwise you might catch coronavirus or COVID-19 from other people if they're working from your spot. So maybe hotspot becomes, or hotspots become a lot less current, but then that would come at a cost as well. So I think there's going to be a bit of a balancing act. Yes, we should move towards alternative work strategies and activity-based working, but we should also recognise the implications of that. But some people, absolutely, 1 day a week will be all the connection they need. Other people, Helena, talking to the person working from home on their own, single, with the work being their primary social connection, I'd expect them to be 3 to 5 days a week, as they need, more so than somebody who is escaping the 3 children and they just need a breather from home life sometimes.
Hot coffee.
Yeah, hot coffee, that's right.
Toilet break. All right. So we've got a question here around, and Marcus has already answered it. So thank you. You're a fabulous panelist, Marcus. But I do want to open it up, and I will get you, Marcus, to answer the question, just in case everyone didn't see it, the other attendees. And it's an anonymous person. They're saying, I'd love to understand or get some suggestions around how to encourage others to focus on their well-being and their work balance. It challenges my own sense of purpose that I can't convince or contribute to others bettering their own environments while I have time and resources to support them. So Marcus, do you want to kick us off? And then I'm keen on if anyone else on the panel would love to share some practical suggestions of how you'd manage that.
Look, I answered that in written form, and I'd really just revisit that, simply saying that when it's a really interesting scenario, because when you know a lot about health, or you know that you can impact people's health and quality of life, you can serve them, you can add value in any way. It might be with health, it might be to help them with their family dynamics, or it might be to give them suggestions on how to manage their workload better or communicate more effectively. Whatever the case is, whenever you offer unsolicited advice, invariably a person feels either judged or like they don't necessarily want to hear what you've got to offer. And so I think I've always taken, well, certainly in my later years where I think maybe I've accumulated a little bit more sensitivity, understanding and awareness, that you can't inflict your ideas on other people, whether you perceive or believe them to be right or not. And I just simply, my approach has always now been, if somebody asks me for guidance, direction, then I'll offer some support and encouragement so they can make self-directed change. And that includes being a practitioner. I do have the luxury of people coming in saying to me, I have these challenges, please help me, which means they're more predisposed to make changes. But I can assure you, having encouraged family members and friends to make changes, that it's almost always not well received. So, and as I wrote there, be the change, as Gandhi said, that you want to see in the world. And if you take the type of actions that inspire, motivate, engage and energize people, they will see you doing those things and their curiosity will be piqued. Because if you're the person that walks in the office, high energy, high motivation, passionate about what you do, making positive, beneficial and impactful changes, then you become the type of person that people want to be around, and they will soon, over time, ask for your guidance and direction without you having to tell them, you know what, you could be doing X, Y, Z, and probably generating some resistance. But, you know, I loved what Helena said earlier, which is, you know, people have resilience normally have a greater purpose. If you find a big enough why, you will always find a how, and that will help you to maintain your direction, your energy, and your motivation. That will allow you to serve on a bigger level. But people will come to you, not you having to go to them.
Well said. That's a hard act to follow, team. Any other reflections on any tips that you could give that person? Or any reflections on this word cloud? Oh, not the word cloud, the comments that are zooming past. So while you're having a look at those comments, Marcus, you've also shared a link to a great book. So do you want to tell us in half a minute what the book is about and why you recommend it?
Yeah, there was a question there from one of the participants about, you know, the importance of connection, whether it's office, social or otherwise, and is there any research? And well, I haven't looked at the most recent research. There was a book called Love and Survival, and unfortunately I can't remember the author off the top of my head, but I read that probably 20 years ago, and it highlighted unequivocally that if we do not have community, if we are not connected to each other and have support, then we actually die earlier and we have more disease and more sickness. So, and there's more modern research, which I can't quote off the top of my head, but there is absolutely, without doubt, that if we do not have our community, if we don't have connection within our workplaces and our family, we're going to suffer significantly. So, you know, I know you've been such a strong advocate for this, Vanessa, over such a long period of time about the workplace support and the workplace community and having flexibility, and all of these beautiful comments about how flexible work impacts life. It shows that, one, we need to have our workplace and our environment supporting us, but we also need to create the community and the family that allows us to have the space to fulfill all of our missions in life, our work mission, our family mission, and our personal mission. So, you know, there is a necessary balancing of all of these elements, but we need it without doubt.
Yeah,
And
well
just
said.
if I can jump in on that, thanks, Marcus. There's been lots of research that absolutely says, you know, we're creatures that actually need to have these connections, and not only does our physical health suffer when we don't have these connections with community, family, work, our physical health, our mental health, and our longevity also suffers. And so, you know, we're actually built to connect, and when we feel that we're not connected or we feel excluded, an interesting thing happens in our brain is that we actually feel our brain responds like it's a threat to us. And of course, this is because years gone by, when we were hunters and gatherers, our survival depended on being part of a community or part of a clan. And so when we don't have those connections, we don't feel connected, we do feel excluded, our brain has that threat response. And it's a very, our reptilian brain has that threat response. And so it actually really does seek out connections because we are social beings. We are built to belong to a community, a clan, a group, whatever it is, for our health, our overall health, mental health and physical health.
There's a comment here, thank you for that, that says there's similar results done by Mayo Clinic on the benefits of volunteering into old age, which relates to those connections within the community as well. So I hadn't heard of that, but thank you for sharing, whoever shared that. Any reflections, Christo or Andrea, on the comments that are coming through before we move on? I'd love to open it up to you. You don't have to make a comment, but give you the option.
Yeah, happy to comment. I think as everyone is sharing, I think we've all been able to experience the positive side of flexible working, in this case, working from home, where so many people have been doing this, some of them for the first time with the pandemic. I think obviously having that independency of when you like how you work around when you're at home or when you're far from the office, how your day goes. And not only, I think, going back to the office, in my case, HFM is already a flexible company. It encourages this. So having this flexibility of starting at certain time, finishing off, some people going to pick up their kids, some people going to volunteer, everyone pursuing their own personal goals and priorities. That has a really positive impact, not only in our personal lives, but also in the environment in the office, because everyone feels valued and appreciated, and we all understand. I think it's important to understand the culture behind flexible work and having everyone on board, so that no one feels left behind. When some companies only offer flexible work arrangements for people who have children, then someone who maybe doesn't plan on having children might feel left behind. And I think when the whole workforce has these flexible work arrangements, that's going to improve their overall health and well-being, because they can pursue their goals, they can feel valued, they have that sense of belonging to that group and that company. And yeah, I think overall that would be my input from what I've experienced while working with flexible work arrangements.
Thank you. Christo, do you want to add any comments?
Others have had some great comments. I will just add on to Andrea's though. For me, I think in the past we have treated flexible work arrangements as a privilege that we give to our individual employees. And I think that increasingly over time, if you want the best, most productive, creative people to work for you, it will not be a privilege you give them, but a necessity for your business to adapt to that sort of environment. So for me, we haven't, you know, there are some businesses that have recognized that, but a lot are still, okay, fantastic, you're working from home, I expect you to be online between this and this hour, and you'll carry out the same style of activities that you would undertake as if you were at work, but you won't, you know, it'll be between these hours and I'll expect you to go to these 10 meetings and things like that. As we get better at these things and addressing a lot of the issues that are coming up here, I think we'll genuinely become more agile and flexible. We won't expect you to attend every meeting. You'll be far more focused on getting things, delivering things rather than being there to see things. You'll work when you feel like working, not when work expects you to work, because that's an obsolete thought. So I think there's a real mental shift that is likely to occur from being a privilege to a necessity, but I think we're still a fair way away from that.
I was hoping that wasn't the case.
Yep.
I was hoping we were closer, but I've learnt today we're probably not as close as I wanted. But that's just a reality. We're on a paradigm shift, aren't we?
I think we're about to take a leap forward. This is a great opportunity for people to understand that actually we no longer are working in manufacturing facilities of 100 years ago. We have large workforces that don't need to be constrained physically, and we have the technology to release their creativity and innovative capability. But that isn't by saying, let's have a workshop to do something. It is by letting them unpack the dishwasher or go out and doing some weeding and coming up with ideas just as much as it is for that workshop.
It's that real strategic focus.
Yeah.
So what we'd love to hear from you are your reflections from today's panel. So if you jump onto Menti and type in the code, we have had a question from Nicole, which Marcus, you're a fabulous panelist, like I said before, very responsive. But Nicole had asked, what are some of the perspectives on workplace health and safety and working from home? So what we're going to do is, as people share their reflections from today's panel, is where I'm going to ask each of the panelists to share their final comment. So Marcus, can I kick off with you, keeping in mind Nicole's point there, if you want to talk to that in your response? Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's probably potentially a charged statement, and I say it purely from I guess, a growth-oriented perspective. So the question was, you know, about responsibility for work, health and safety, and, you know, is it the individuals, is it the organisations? And obviously it's a paired thing. I think I always come from the position, though, it doesn't matter whether we're talking about anything in relation to the workplace, in my opinion. The individual is always responsible. You're responsible for whatever choice or decision you make. There's always the psychology position of the victim or the victor. And if you're going to be victorious in any situation, your health or otherwise, then you take personal responsibility. While everybody has a responsibility, you are individual responsibility for your health, for your life, for your experiences. And that even means if the organisation, in my later comments, said that, you know, the organisation has to support that and create the environment to ensure that that takes place. If they don't, you still have the individual power and therefore responsibility to say, this is not an organisation that fulfills its responsibilities towards my health. But the first part is saying, I know that my body doesn't feel good in this position, and maybe I'm not taking good care of my body, so the responsibility still starts with me. The ergonomics is not always as big an issue for a person who has great resilience, an adaptive body, and therefore has incredible health. So it is the individual firstly responsible, in my mind, in my position, to become healthy, to recognize the messages from their body. And when those messages say that there is imbalance, to draw that to the attention of their manager, somebody within their organization, to say that there needs to be an ergonomic assessment, there needs to be appropriate safety measures in place, and then there needs to be alignment between organization and individual with an open and important conversation. And when we come with that transparency, we come with that servant heart rather than a dependency position, then I think we get greater involvement and greater contribution from the organisations. And I'm not saying that every organisation will do that, and a person who is empowered probably won't work for an organisation like that. So again, it's a bit of a charged statement, but it's just something I think if we want to become the best versions of ourselves, we take that personal responsibility.
Fabulous, Marcus. And how can people be connected with you? Marcus has got lots of different solutions. So he works with people with arthritis. So Marcus, correct me if you're wrong, but you've got an online training program that supports people in that space. You do ergonomic assessments for business. And he's also a local chiropractor, naturopath, nutritionist here in Canberra as well. So Marcus, how can people connect with you?
I'll write my practice name down there. You can contact the practice if there's any need, and I'll just put that in the box there. But ultimately, it's just about people finding a way to their own health and well-being. So I'll just put that in the message box. Thanks you, Vanessa.
Wonderful, thank you. Helena, why don't you share with us your final comments, and if there's any reflections on what you've seen come up on this, these comments, and also how we can be in contact with you as well. You're on mute. Helena, you're on mute.
Is that better?
Yeah, much better. We heard nothing. Start again. Thank you.
Thanks, Vanessa. And I've been looking at some of the comments coming up, and I think, you know, we've gone a little way, but there's still a long way to go. But I'm actually optimistic that in relation to flexible working practices, and I agree that, you know, perhaps in the past some organisations have thought that it is a privilege, but I think gradually, you know, we are getting to the point of view that, look, it's actually a necessity, and this is it's going to be business as usual going forward. And I think the recognition that flexible work is not one size fits all, as of course we all know, and it means different things to different people, and that might mean partially working from home. It might mean altered hours. It's not 8:30 to 5 or 9 to 5. And, you know, we do need to have the recognition to be able to fit the rest of our life around our work life, rather than, I think, you know, traditional models as being work life has really dominated our personal lives. And certainly in terms of our mental health and well-being, it's absolutely about getting that balance, but also, and I'm thinking now in the COVID environment, and about Marcus's comments about, well, we are responsible for our own health and well-being. From a mental health perspective, I think it's important that we recognise when perhaps we're not travelling so well, when we might be feeling anxious about certain things and the uncertainty that the pandemic environment has created. And so notice that and do reach out for help, because help is there. So I think the first thing is having a self-awareness and noticing that, and then being responsible and actually going and seeking help to support your own mental health.
I'm on mute, so I'll be talking to myself as well. So how can people get in contact with you?
Maybe I'll just do the same as Marcus and just pop contact details in the chat.
Fabulous, great idea. Andrea, any reflections on what's coming up and your final comments?
Yeah, well, it's been great to hear the health component, which I had experienced the positive, but I don't really have the background knowledge on that. So it's been great to get to hear and understand a bit better how it impacts our lives. And yeah, I think by reading the comments, I'm also optimistic like the other panelists, hoping that more companies will join, and that from all these pandemic and these difficult situation, hopefully will bring something good, and it would help more companies get used to these new style and promote these and help their employees and support them to follow and pursue their personal goals. And not only because as you grow personally, you're going to grow professionally as well, and you're going to bring better talent, you're going to bring better input to the company, more creativity, as it was said before. So hopefully we'll see this happening in more companies, and in a few years we'll be remembering the good that came out of this difficult time for everyone.
Fabulous, thank you. And the CEO of HFM Asset Management, where Andrea works, he's provided a talk in the Reframing Flexibility for the Future virtual summit, which is free until Sunday. So you can learn lots more about their culture if you log in and get access to that talk. And lucky last, Christo. Love to hear your thoughts on what's your reflections are on these comments, and also your last comment for this evening's panel discussion.
Oh, look, I'm excited. I think that when I look back 3 months ago, 4 months ago, when if you wanted to work for a couple of days at home, you would have to fill in a form. We would tell you that you can't use this technology because you don't have the right approvals for it. And anyway, we don't agree with it. To today, when we now have, certainly in my own department, we've got thousands of people now working from home. The entire expectations of the workforce has changed. And far from this, us being in a disheartening position with this, I see the shifting mindset of society is going to shift the way that we view these things. WHS for me is a really interesting one as an example. I think, Marcus, you were right on the money, but you were wrong, at least traditionally wrong. We would like to see workplace health assessments done at your home. We would take the responsibility because we were always concerned about being liable for something going wrong, and creating a joint responsibility. I think you're absolutely right. Where the individual manages internally their own home, but works collaboratively with their workplace to ensure that it is a good, healthy home/workplace, is absolutely the way of the future. Rather than abrogating my own personal responsibility for that WHS, it will become a joint thing as we move forward. But I'm really excited. I think that this is a great opportunity. I see that the shifting societal norms will change the way that large enterprises, both government and private, will have their workforces operate. And I think that we're going to see some incredible creativity coming out of it. It won't happen as quickly as I would like to see, but it's going to happen 10 times quicker than I ever thought it would because of the last few months. That's my gut feel.
Your gut feel is always right.
Yeah.
That's what I've learned as I've got old and grey. So thank you to this absolutely fabulous panel. Your time is very precious, and I appreciate you taking out an hour out of your day. It's huge. So happy flexible working day, and thank you.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.